All right. Welcome, Chris Cornelison. I'm excited for this one. So, our mutual friend Devin connected us. Um, you're an author, you're a leader, and culture is your thing. You sent me a copy of this book,
Yep.
which I was super excited to get in the mail. It's even signed right there on the cover. So, yeah, that was an exciting moment for me. And for anyone listening to this, if you go to your website, that's chriscornelison.com,
Mhm.
there'll be a discount code. So, all the information, your link, and the discount code will be in the bio everywhere, or in the description everywhere this video is posted. Um, but yeah, thanks for coming on, Chris.
Awesome. I'm really excited to be here, Jake, and excited to talk to your listeners.
Yeah, so let's just jump right in with your book. And I love doing these episodes with authors since you've already got everything organized. It as you know, the interviewer, it makes my job a little easier. So, your book is called Superculture.
Mhm.
What is the thesis of Superculture?
So, my background is I was an independent pharmacy owner or a small business owner, third generation. And when I started as an owner, not just a pharmacist, but when I bought the business, I was super young. There wasn't a lot of structure in the business. It was owned by my grandfather, who was a great man, taught me a lot of things, but it was just one small business, didn't have a lot of things written down. And the culture had gotten really bad. I, at that point in my life, had poor leadership skills, no emotional intelligence, and didn't even know really that culture existed in a business. And I got really close to bankruptcy. And I tell my whole story in the book, and just finally realized that this wasn't the way to live. It wasn't the way to let the people around me live. It wasn't the way to lead my team. And I hired a business coach. I made some life changes. I started getting all the leadership training I could. And I developed into being known as a guy that could take a bad work environment and make it good and process it out. And at that time, I didn't realize it was that big a deal. But over the course of the next 2 decades and mentoring and coaching and keynoting to a lot of people around the country, I realized that it actually was a big deal. And a lot of work environments were struggling from not having a good culture. And so I started sharing my processes with the world, and that's kind of the book is like a 5-step process on how to take a maybe a bad environment or a not successful environment and make it a successful environment and create a happy team. So it's make everybody happy, enjoy what they do, and make the company they work for successful. It's also can be used in parenting, coaching, athletic teams, a lot of different ways you could take my book, but that's kind of the thesis behind it.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you're saying there, where you didn't realize at first the value that you had. And culture is something I would consider kind of a high lever variable. You know, it's a little detail. It might not be evident if you look at it right away. It's not going to show up directly on the balance sheet, but it creates a huge impact in all business operations. So, when did you realize that this impact you were having is culture or environment, whatever you want to call it? But when did you realize that you were kind of um, having this impact on this sort of subtle nature, this it's indirect.
Yeah, there was a few different times in my life. I had a business coach, and he was leading me along the journey, and I had several mentors and things. But there was a point where my business had turned around, and we went from one location to three locations, and we really had it rolling good. We were starting to win some national awards, and a friend of mine, I was teaching some classes for a company called Pharmacy Development Services, which was a company that helped pharmacy owners be better business people. And everybody around me started noticing not only was my business doing well, but my people on my team loved being there. And when people would come visit my store, there was just something different about it and different about the atmosphere. And so the guy that owned it, Dan Benamos, he asked me if I would give a keynote. And at that time, I didn't even really understand how to give a keynote, but when I keynoted his conference on how I built this culture. And when I did it, the impact was just overwhelming. Now, at that time in my career, I was teaching a little about leadership, and I was teaching companies how to put processes in to make profit. But I really didn't think that much about teaching people how to invent a great culture. And it was very well received. And then the next thing I knew, an author, Patty Mara, wrote her book, Up Solutions. And she wrote a few things about my team and the dramatic turnaround my team had had over time. And there was just that started the aha moments of I could really impact people and their work environments if I, started sharing this more with the world. And kind of the rest is history, man. I signed with Picture Perfect Speaker and Steve Gilliland, and he gets me gigs. And I go around the country and do my thing.
That's so cool. And so at this point, are you still in the pharmaceutical, the pharmacy world, or are you fully in as the culture guy at this point?
No, so I sold my pharmacies. So I don't own pharmacies. I do own a supplement company called Solutions RX, and we are in a lot of independent pharmacies. So I feel like I'm still tied to the pharmacy industry, but I don't practice pharmacy much anymore, and I don't own pharmacies anymore. So my main job is keynote speaker, culture speaker. I speak on leadership, emotional intelligence, and culture.
And when did you know it was time to kind of um, go from the pharmacy business to the consultant business? Like, what when did you realize that what you'd done was impactful enough that you could kind of um, start replicating that for other business owners and help them?
Yeah, that's a good question, Jay. So a few things happened. Number one, I I joined Strategic Coach, and that's an entrepreneurs organization, and they really started talking about unique ability. And my unique ability is being able to teach and coach people to see a little more in themselves and to take tough topics and make them what I call next level simplicity. So I think I'm a really simple person. I can take neuroscience and talk it down into day to day situations. And as I was in coach, and I knew that what gave me energy in the world was teaching and coaching other people. I started realizing that there was going to be an exit at some point to get out of the pharmacy world, not out of the world, but out of the ownership. And when COVID hit, I had a young man that had been working for me for several years. And I knew he wanted to be an owner, and I knew I wanted to be a keynote speaker and author and run my supplement company. And so the stars just aligned, and we both knew it was right, and it was right for him. Also, he was a young man coming into the career, and I was an older guy kind of leaving that career. And so when it lined up and I realized I had this unique ability and I really wanted to chase it, uh, it became perfect timing for him. There's not much good came out of COVID, but one good thing was small business loans, where if you took it in that time, there was some relief in it. So it just made it was really good for him and really good for me. And so I took the leap of faith, and it's been a fun run after that.
Super cool. I want to dive into something you said, and the way I generally do these podcasts is quality values podcast. When I kind of feel your values coming through, I like to dig in.
Mhm.
You said next level simplicity. That was what you had. I want to
Yeah,
dive into that. I think I know what you mean, but it's kind of an oxymoron right there. So,
yeah, yeah.
um, so yeah, dive in. What does next level simplicity mean to you, and then how do you exemplify that? How do you build that?
Yes, yes, yes. So it's a term I created, next level simplicity. And what I found was I'm really deeply, I've studied a lot of neuroscience. Okay. So I know a lot about emotional intelligence and how it affects the brain, yours and other people's. And, one of my mantras is praise what you want repeated. So a lot of people, when they talk about neuroscience, they get on the fight or flight side, but they never get to the praise side. So they don't work that in leadership. And the word neuroscience turns people off. So I can't go up to keynote and say, hey, I'm gonna give you a neuroscience talk on the brain today. Nobody wants to hear that. So I had to learn that one of my gifts was to take a tough topic, speak it in, I'm from Mississippi, so my vocabulary is not very big anyway. So I had to speak it in simple terms because that's the way I learn. I have to learn the simple way and then build on it. So I learned that one of my unique abilities was to take tough topics and make it a fun way to learn and make it a little more simple. I'm looking forward to, as we get deeper in values on your show today. I'll try to talk a little neuroscience and tell you guys where I am. We'll talk a little emotional intelligence at some point if you want to, and I'll kind of hopefully let your listeners hear it's pretty simple, but it's a really deep concept. so,
Yeah.
so to me, next level simplicity is when you take a deep topic and you make everybody really understand it. Well, one of the most powerful moments, I was in Texas doing a keynote for the Perrytown Leadership Conference not too long ago, and a guy walked up to me and gave me the best compliment. He said, I've heard this emotional intelligence thing several times over the last 8 or 10 years. He said, but I never got it till today. He said, but I got it today. He said, I understood what you were saying. And that's what it's all about. It's not how good or bad I do, it's how impactful it is for people and how they can use it.
Yeah, so let's dive into emotional intelligence. Something you've brought up a couple times.
Yeah.
I've heard the term EQ
Hmm.
being thrown around more and more lately.
Yes.
That kind of goes adjacent, but not exactly with IQ. But yeah. So when you're working with a client, when you're working with a company, and you're helping build their culture up, what kinds of red flags do you see that might show that their emotional intelligence isn't where it needs to be? And then how would you go about building that up? How do you go about instilling that in the company culture?
Yeah, so some of the red flags when I work with a new company, I do interviews and actually ask them, what's a hard day like? What are the challenges and obstacles you deal with in your industry on a day to day? And I hear that, and then I'm able to think about it from their point of view and their customer or their internal customer, their employee that might be a direct report. And so that's where I usually find most of my red flags and what are their issues and their problems. And it's easy to dissect that because emotional intelligence, there's three phases, and I talk about this in my book. You mentioned EQ, IQ. So IQ is your intellectual quotient. That's how smart you are. And EQ is your emotional quotient, how well you deal with emotions. All right. So, and really, the only way we can grow as a leader, the only way we can grow our company, the only way we can be a better anything, father, mother, friend, is to gain awareness. Okay, we have to be aware that a problem exists to fix it. And in our human mind, there's three phases of emotional intelligence, and the first phase is emotional awareness. If you don't become aware there's a problem there, you will keep making the same mistake over and over. So my story in my book, I'll just share it. So I used to get mad in the pharmacy. I had no emotional intelligence. I'd slam my hand, raise my voice, and I'd kick this garbage can in. And I did this over and over and over and over. And so it was the same cycle every day. Something would make me mad. I kick the garbage can in. My team shuts down. We're failing. We're failing. We're failing. And I was headed to bankruptcy. Uh, and the reason people never gain awareness is because they trip this thing in their brain called the amygdala. And emotions fire the amygdala. Now, those emotions could be anger, fear, stress, embarrassment. And a lot of times when I talk to a company, I'm laying this foundation. I'm like, let's talk about some things that could cause fear, anger, stress, or embarrassment in your workforce. And one of them's, a boss yelling at you. When you don't feel like you deserve it, a boss not coaching you into the whys. If somebody just screams at you all the time, that can cause embarrassment. And if that happens every day, then the front door of the office can be the thing that triggers the amygdala, and we don't even know what happens. When the amygdala triggers, we lose the human ability to think because there's three phases of emotional intelligence. Phase one is emotional awareness, and most people never leave phase one because they can't control their own emotions. Phase two is called emotional control. When you get to phase two, you get awareness and say, oh, I'm kicking this garbage can in and my team's not responding very well and my company sucks. That's where I was in life. The minute I realized, oh, I'm the one that's yelling, I'm the one that's screaming, and it's tripping other people's amygdala because they're becoming embarrassed, they're becoming fearful, they're becoming disrespected by me. I'm not proud of the person I was in my early 20s, but I didn't know how to run a business back then. I didn't know about emotional intelligence. So the minute I became aware of that, and got control of my emotions, then you have the human ability to think. If you don't get to phase two emotional awareness, you lose the human ability to think because your amygdala in your brain shuts down the neocortex, which is the thinking part. So all I want you to realize is that when we get mad, when we get embarrassed, and we shut our brain down, we lose the ability to think and problem solve. So phase one, awareness. Phase two is control. And if I can control my emotions, now I can look at the situation and say, what makes me mad? You want to hear something stupid?
Yeah.
What made me mad back in the day was when we got too busy. Now think about this. I'm the business owner, and when the business got busy, I got mad and shut my team down, which is the worst possible thing I could have done. Right? My grandfather told me one time. I would complain about us being busy. I'd act like a jerk. I'd shut the whole team down. And finally, one day, I was just having to say, and I'd say, "Man, if we could just get caught up, if we could just get caught up." And he looked at me one day, and he said, "Hell, son, if we get caught up, we're out of business." And I was like, "That's such a good point." So for me personally, just learning to gain awareness, being able to control the emotions that were hurting me, and being able to go to phase three, which is emotional improvement, allowed me to change my reaction to the event. So when we got busy, I didn't get mad. I said, why are we busy? Are my processes strong enough? Am I leading my team at all? At that time, I wasn't leading my team at all. Am I praising the things that they're getting right? Am I telling them why I would like them to do something different as it would be beneficial to them, me, and the customer? And I wasn't doing any of those things because I had no emotional awareness. And the minute you learn these things, and all these are in chapter one in my book of, rule number one is it all starts with you. The minute you start to learn these things, your EQ, your emotional quotient, starts to go up. And every time for the rest of your life, you get more awareness, you get better as a leader, as a person, just all around. So that's one thing I stay excited about when I talk about emotional intelligence. Every time somebody gets it for the first time, they're at a certain point in their life. But the thing it does, it always gives them the next phase, because we always have blind spots. We're always unaware of something. Dr. Eric Thomas, I'm a big Eric Thomas fan. He says the inability to self-assess is why most people fail. All right. The inability to assess yourself is why most people fail. Well, I get in deeper to the question, well, why would people not self-assess? It's because they have no emotional intelligence. So when people, your show's a lot about values, when people step on your values, and they're going to, it doesn't make them right or wrong or you right or wrong, but it does mean those hardcore core values, when somebody steps on them, it shuts you down. And if you can't gain control of those emotions, if you just get so mad or so embarrassed that you shut down, you never get to phase two, which is control, and you never get to phase three, which is improvement. So you can't make yourself better. And so I step in these companies and I find places they're failing, and I start challenging the leadership on, do you have emotional intelligence, and do you have it of other people? Because we all have an amygdala in our brain. We all have moral values in our core values in our body, and everybody's can be shut down at different times. So you have to learn yours, and then upper level stuff is the people you're dealing with. So there's three phases in your brain, and there's also three phases in everybody else. And if you're shutting them down by what you're doing, if you're an athletic coach and you're yelling when it's not time sensitive, if I was in a work environment, I was yelling when it sure wasn't time sensitive. If you're causing people embarrassment, the number one reason people leave their jobs is a lack of empathy. So a lack of appreciation and praise. A lack of appreciation in the workplace can really shut the brain down. So I'm looking at a company and I'm saying, do you have goals? A lot of them don't. If they do, though, are you praising the things that lead to those goals, or are you just mentioning it one time a quarter and forgetting about it? These are the little nuances. And I know I rambled there a little bit, but those are the type things that go into emotional awareness. And I pride myself on next level simplicity. Was that simple enough, Jake, or did you need
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was great. And feel free to ramble. That's kind of the point of this podcast here.
go?
As kind of an aside, I want to check in on the amygdala, and
Mm-hmm.
let me tell you a little bit about what I remember from my Psych 101 class forever ago.
Yeah.
And then maybe tell me where I'm off base a little bit, and I just want to understand as best I can how the amygdala works. So a couple details I remember about the amygdala is that it's triggered with emotion, which you were mentioning, and when it's triggered, it converts short-term memory into long-term memory.
Yes.
Um, and then I also remember that it's any emotion triggers it, positive or negative, but the negative tends to trigger it more easily, or more thoroughly. Is so? Am I a little off on that?
You're close. Let me clarify just a little. All right. So the amygdala is your fight or flight mechanism of your brain. Okay. It's a small piece size portion of your brain. It's deep in, but it's fight or flight. Okay. So it doesn't really enhance memory. It decides if you fight or flight. So the emotions, the negative emotions, if it trips it and turns it on, your brain shuts down the thought process, the fight, because everything goes into save your life. Now, here's the interesting thing. Back in the caveman days, there was a lot of life and death situations, right? If they couldn't get a fire started, if it was raining, they might not be able to boil water or cook. They don't get to go to the grocery store and buy food. They have to kill it, hunt it, drag it home, right? So a lot of fight or flight situations would trip back then to save their life. Our brains have evolved because of cell phones, the industrial revolution, now AI, and we make literally. I heard an expert. I usually say 10,000 more decisions a day. I heard an expert the other day say 60,000 more small, minute, quick decisions every day. So our brains, we're not faced with a lot of life and death. You might occasionally come close to a car wreck or something, but it's not all that often, right? And so, I mean, if we need to get food, we go to the grocery store. If we're, uncomfortable temperature wise, we turn the central air heater up or down. But we make 60,000 more decisions. So our amygdalas now have evolved to trigger over not life and death situations, but just high energy emotions that occur in the workplace, like stress and anxiety. I see a lot of people, oh, today's going to be a bad day. We're going to be crazy busy, blah, blah, blah. And they trip their amygdala. Okay, because these emotions get going, they get so stressed out, they trip their amygdala, and they lose the ability to think. The reason the amygdala is tied to your long term memory is because there's a chemical that I get in the praise part called acetylcholine. And when it circulates in your brain, memory is greatly enhanced. That's how we produce long term memories through acetylcholine. But when the amygdala trips, it pushes all that acetylcholine into our body to get ready to fight or flight because our brain really thinks this is a life or death situation, even though it may just be my computer's running slow today. I've got a hard phone call. My boss just yelled at me. I'm embarrassed about the way I'm being treated. I'm embarrassed about the poor job performance I did yesterday, and I'm scared I'm going to do it again today. Those things, if you don't have any emotional awareness, can control your thoughts, and that inhibits you from having long time learning because it shows the acetylcholine out. On the other hand, Jay, if you have a great environment, a great culture, and your leaders are coaching leaders that praise what they want repeated, praise triggers dopamine in the brain, and dopamine, when it goes to the brain, it has acetylcholine follow it. When we're very comfortable and stimulated in our environment, like you're relaxed today, I'm relaxed today, you made me feel really comfortable. So acetylcholine's in my brain, so we can store memory quicker now, and we can pull from memory better now because we're not shut down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm glad I asked. So I'm a trainer, right? And I call my training brand Fight and Flight Conditioning. So I'm glad I asked. Are you familiar with Walter Cannon? He was I think he was called a physiologist, but back in like 1910.
That name sounds really familiar. I'm sure I've seen his work because I've studied so many different ones, and that
Yeah,
does sound familiar. But I can't place it. Go ahead and tell me what you were going to tell me.
yeah. So I mean, I dove down this rabbit hole when I kind of came up with that brand. The reason I call it that is I train martial artists and I train runners. You know, I like to run. I did an ultra marathon and I do jujitsu and all this stuff. So I wanted to, yeah, that was kind of the term I came up with. But anyways, in my after I came up with that, I started researching the origin of that term, and it was this guy Walter Cannon. He has this book called Wisdom of the Body,
Mm.
and the whole book is about homeostasis. So um, the thesis is basically that the human body is a brilliant at maintaining homeostasis. So when we're presented with these life and death situations, we go into fight or flight. Um, and you're talking about acetylcholine here. It's a little bit above my pay grade there, but yeah, it's that's the body's way of maintaining. We get out of the situation and then everything falls back. But if we didn't go into that fight or flight response, we'd be at risk of losing it all.
Let me clarify acetylcholine a little and talk. Let's talk about the fight. I love your name, fight or flight. So people often will say, "Well, what about the military? What about high level athletics? And what about UFC?" So, Pastor, what about the UFC? And I'm a big UFC fan. I enjoy watching it too. And they say, those guys are in fight or flight situations. They're going to the ring for a fight, but you train for that situation. I've heard a ton of UFC fighters say they're scared as heck when they get to the ring, but they know when they close that door, they've trained to cope and deal with it. So their amygdala does not shut down. And when the fight actually starts, the acetylcholine, the adrenaline starts rushing to their brain to help them think. Now, you know better than I, anytime somebody gets scared in that ring or loses control or thinks, oh, I got myself in a bad situation, that's when they get caught and it's over. The minute their amygdala triggers in the fight, they lose their ability to think and they lose the ability to fight at that maximum level. So it's you're in a fearful situation. You're looking across the ring or in a jiu-jitsu match or something. You're fixing to fight somebody that could hurt you, but that's part of the fun too, right? The hyperachieve. But instead of firing the amygdala in that situation, you control those emotions and you're able to continue to think and fight your best fight and be your best self. It's the exact same thing in the workplace and everything. And acetylcholine, I call that the maximum focus chemical. So if we eliminated the word acetylcholine and said there's a maximum focus chemical, and what happens, I call noradrenaline in my book the challenge chemical. Okay, so hyperachievers, and I'm this hyperachiever, or fighters. You go into that fight, and if you can't overcome the fear, you're going to shut down. You're probably going to get beat pretty quick, right? But if you overcome the fear, because the adrenaline of the fight, the joy of competing is so much in your brain, acetylcholine follows that into your brain, and now you remember when you're practicing, and when you get into the big fights, the matches, you respond to that memory because your gym created maximum focus. And what happens in those maximum focus times, you know how when you're in there and you're instructing your students and whatnot, and you're teaching those situations and they're locked in, they're loving it, you shoved acetylcholine in their brain by challenging them, all right, giving them a good challenge. You probably praised them as a coach, probably you're doing this good, you're doing that good, and that created a comfortable environment and they got in there. If they just walked in your gym, you said, Chris, you suck. You're getting killed in all the matches, and just sit over there, dude. I'm tired of messing with you. That's going to fire my amygdala. It's going to shut me down. And then if I just jump in the fight, I'm probably going to get scared when somebody punches me in the face. I'm going to lose. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So as leaders, understanding emotional intelligence lets us know when we're shut down, when we're being a jerk, or when we're scared, or when we're having anxiety. It gives us a way to deal with it, and it gives us the ability to lead others by helping them not shut down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, I love it. It's what you're saying is reminding me of a Mike Tyson quote from back when he was at his peak, and I'm sure you've heard it. But he's talking about leading up to a fight. He gets scared. He's like, he starts thinking, "Oh man, this I might lose. This man might be capable of beating me." And he's walking down to the ring, and he's all this run through his mind, and he's starting to have all these doubts. And then he says, "As soon as I walk in that ring, I'm a god." He's got the Mike Tyson.
That's not the way I thought you were using. That's awesome. That's awesome.
So yeah, I love that. Are you familiar with Nassim Taleb? He's like an economist, an author. I say microdynamics. He talks about group psychology and economics from a macro level.
I feel like I've heard his name too, but I've not read his literature. I hadn't read his book.
There's two things that you're talking about there. Remind me. One is anti-fragility, and so an anti-fragile system is something that responds to stress by gaining. It gets stronger when it's exposed to stress, and so the human is the perfect example of that. We go in the gym, we lift weights. Temporarily, our muscles break down. We get a little bit weaker. After the workout, we probably can't lift as much weight as we did during the workout. But give us a week or two to recover, and we're going to be able to lift a little bit more weight. On average, we're going to get stronger after these workouts. So we're anti-fragile systems. But yeah, and so kind of the thesis behind my fight and flight conditioning was that I'm training people for these fight and flight scenarios to kind of raise their ability level at homeostasis, so that stress you out within a manageable threshold now, so that when your levels return back to normal, they're slightly higher than they were at the beginning. But is that something that you've experienced in coaching with company culture?
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%. I was just thinking while you were talking. We've been talking about kind of the fight game and working out and things, but it all gets back to emotional intelligence, leadership, and your culture. Yeah, you used the word anti-fragile from Dr. Talib. Is that who you said?
Yeah, Nassim
Yeah,
Taleb.
yeah. So that's his word. So what that means to me is like you said that means that we're able to respond to stress, and I would say that's because we have the human brain can become aware. So when you're training, you're either training for longevity or better health, or to protect yourself, or you just might want to look better. You want to might physically want to change, but what those stressors in this situation, we'll call them, or you know what those goals you want to achieve are. And so you're aware that I'm here and this is going to help me get to my goal. So you just keep getting stronger and stronger. The brain works the exact same way in the emotional intelligence side. The more you become aware and you gain control, and you realize that once I gain control, now I have the neocortex ability to think and problem solve, then you can change the event. Events are going to come in life forever. Forever. There's the bad days. It's going to rain some days. If it rains and I get mad and I leave the house over and over and over again, I'm just going to keep getting wet. But if it rains and I say, hey, it's raining today, I'm not going to get mad about this. I need to get an umbrella. So I changed my reaction to the event and got better. If I would have kept kicking my garbage can every time I got mad in my career, I would have went bankrupt. I mean, I was really close.
Yeah, I like that. That's a cool experience kicking the garbage can, but that's a good metaphor to tie these things together. And I like the fight. The fight game kind of epitomizes a lot
It
of these
does.
things, so it's a cool example. Another thing you were mentioning earlier also reminded me of Nassim Taleb. He's one of my favorite authors, if not my favorite. But he kind of breaks a person's knowledge into three categories. Um, there's the known knowns, so that's the stuff that you know it. There's the known unknowns, so that's the books on your shelf that you haven't read yet. You know that information is there, um, but you haven't fully absorbed it. So I might say that like these acetylcholine, that kind of falls in that. I've heard these terms. It's
Yeah,
not in my wheelhouse, so
yeah,
you're helping me kind of convert these known unknowns to known knowns in this conversation. And then the third category is unknown unknowns. And what you were saying that reminded me of all this was the three phases earlier. There was building the awareness, and so that's kind of like filling in those unknown unknowns and at least making them into known unknowns, even if not. um, and
that's
then
exactly. Yeah.
what were the other two phases? There was
So there's
improvement was the
awareness,
third one.
control,
Control,
and
yeah.
improvement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, let me tell you a little more about the brain. I probably should have done this earlier. The way our human brain works is we all have a conscious brain, we all have a subconscious brain, and then we have, I say the third phase is the amygdala. Okay. We all have that. Now, we all unique different individuals because of our core values and all that, but we all have a conscious, subconscious, and amygdala in our brain. And the way our brain works is when we're in conscious thinking, that is the neocortex of our brain. We have the biggest one of any mammal. That gives us the ability to think and problem solve. That gives us the ability to take a unknown what was that middle when you said there was no known? What was the middle phase?
uh, Known unknowns and then unknown unknowns.
Yeah. So as humans, we have the ability to distinguish between those because of our conscious brain. Okay. And we've got the biggest one. And without that conscious brain, you probably heard people say this, we'd be more like a deer or a lizard or a dog. We just react to the situation because we wouldn't have that thinking part of our brain. But here's the thing, humans only use that thinking part about 5 to 10% of the time of the day. The way our brain is wired is we have a subconscious part. The subconscious part of our brain, the good part, is it's 80 times faster than our thinking. Okay. So when we're doing something new, we have to learn it. If you're teaching somebody a new martial arts skill, at the beginning, they're not very good and they practice it, and we get better and better and better. And the acetylcholine that I call the maximum focus chemical, as they get more and more confident in it, it starts to circulate in the brain more and more and more. And then it becomes subconscious. And now those movements are really fast and they're really good and they're really accurate. In the work environment, when you can create good habits in the subconscious, those people work really well, really fast. Your subconscious, we all operate in it about 90% of the day, but it's not necessarily all good. If your subconscious is to get mad every time and be a jerk or lose your cool the minute something goes wrong in the fight and lose your confidence, then that's your subconscious habit. And as a coach, you would be aware of that and you would try to make your pupil aware of that so that we could get them to stop shutting the amygdala down, so that we could get them to emotional control of that fear, and then we could train them to improvement to be a better grappler or a better fighter or a better mentor or a better dad or a better worker in the work environment.
Yeah, love it. Um, there's a term I've read in some sales books, maybe some psychology books, the reptilian brain. Are you Do you
Yes,
know what I'm talking about
that's
there?
exactly what I was talking about. Yeah. So
Yeah.
the reptilian brain is the part of the brain without the neocortex. That is our subconscious. Actually, that is our fight or flight. That's the amygdala firing. When the amygdala fires, it cuts your neocortex off. You can't operate in neocortex conscious thinking, neocortex conscious thinking, and amygdala hijack at the same time. That's how our brains do not work. And I write about this a little bit in my book. So if we can't control emotions enough to not fire the minute the amygdala fires, we can't move into emotional control, so we can't improve. We will go back to the exact habit we've had forever. In the coaching world, a lot of times you'll hear people say an athlete's non-coachable. Right. And that one gets under my skin a little bit because sometimes they're not, and sometimes the coach is not using the right leadership style. So if they don't realize when to yell and when not to yell at an athlete and when to praise an athlete, if the amygdala is shut down, you can be Nick Saban giving Nick Saban type advice and they're not going to hear it. Now, here's the catch. Everybody's seen Nick Saban chew players out and all that. And that's called command and control leadership. And the way our brain functions is we can deal with command and control leadership in time sensitive and life or death situations. So in athletics, there's a clock, there's a time sensitive situation. So we got to go right now. We need you to focus. All right. So sometimes you yell at me, will get me back under control, shut me down and get me right back fired up. And you train me for that. Okay. In mixed martial arts or the fighting game, you're training them for real life and death situations. In the military, they're training for life and death situations. So you do use yelling and command and control. However, when the clock's not running, when they're in the gym sitting there and we're training, if you use command and control leadership in those times, you will trip the amygdala because it's not life and death and it's not time sensitive. That's where you have to use coaching leadership, which is showing them how to get better. It's not yelling at them, which most people think. That's where you praise. And I say my mantra is praise what you want repeated. So if I want somebody to do something a different way, I teach them how to do it, coaching leadership. I show them how to do it, and then I look to catch them getting it right. And then I say, way to go, Jake. Good job. That was really good awareness right there. That was a really good move you put on that guy. Okay. And then in the fight, when the clock's going, hey, Chris, you do this, do that, do that. We can deal with that. But if you use the wrong leadership styles at the wrong times, you trip the amygdala and you inhibit your pupil or your employee or your team member's ability to gain control, to gain awareness, and to move to control and to improve. And emotional intelligence teaches you all of that. And it's something that I'm glad we're laying foundation today. And all of us should get better at that forever. I work on my emotional intelligence every day of my life.
That's super cool. I like how you're presenting coaching as like the optimal coaching strategy is context dependent since
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, it's always hard for me to hear any advice when it's this way or the highway, you know.
Yeah.
It's refreshing to hear your approach here, how it depends in these life or death situations, you know, that the clock's running out. The brain is able to receive advice in these rah-rah, you know, Nick Saban
Mm-hmm.
ways, whereas in, you know, in the practice field without the stakes being as high, it's a little
That to
different.
me, I don't know Coach Saban personally, but I really admire him. I find a lot of people want to compare themselves to Nick Saban when they talk about him winning championships. And they want to compare themselves because they'll pick on Nick Saban. As I did earlier, I wasn't picking on him, but I was saying, he did chew people's players out, but he did it at the right time.
Yeah.
Let me tell you some other things Nick Saban does really well. He's incredibly emotionally aware. Look at how much better he got over his career at emotional intelligence himself. He takes care of his players. He wins their trust. He doesn't yell at them at the wrong times. He uses command and control in those time-sensitive situations. The other time, he loves on them. He praises them. He's an extremely good teacher and coach, and he uses different styles of leadership besides just command and control. And I think he doesn't get enough credit for that. And a lot of people, especially in the coaching world, that will want to mimic him or quote him, don't want to quote the real leadership things that he does on the other side of that. It's like, well, if we're going to compare ourselves to Nick Saban, let's do everything Nick Saban does,. But anyway, one thing too, I think, Jake, and I talk about this in chapter 2 of my book, is a lot of times, and you asked me about when I go into companies too. I was at a Coca-Cola franchise and I was able to teach their management level a few weeks ago. And I teach there are different styles of leadership, and we won't have time to go too deep into it. Maybe we come back and do this another podcast one day just on this. But there's command and control, which I talked about a while ago. That's usually yelling, forceful motions. There's coaching leadership, which is usually confused for command and control. That's when you teach somebody how to do their skill set, how to do their job, and what their role is to your team, whether it's your workforce team, your fight team, your athletic team. Uh, Other styles of leadership are positional leadership. I'm your boss. Okay. And positional leadership is the weakest style of leadership you can use. Because I said so is what you'll hear people using positional leadership is. Now, the boss can usually fire you, and they get that. Let's see, I'm losing my train of thought on other styles I write about in my book. There's democratic leadership where everybody votes. Okay. There's I know the one I was leading out that I was wanting to talk about. There's pace setting leadership. Okay. And pace setting leadership is when I do my job really well, really fast. Okay. So if you have a company, the CEO is going to use more, there's visionary leadership. And the visionary shows the direction. So when you're in your gym, you're using visionary leadership when you decide how we're going to practice that day, what we're going to train on this day, how I'm going to teach you to control the fight or flight side of your brain today. That's visionary leadership. The coaching leadership is when you get down and you show them the skill and why it's going to work. And if they're in the fight and you're going, hey, stop, go, move here, that's command and control leadership. So realizing when to use different styles of leadership, and even that different styles of leadership exist, is a big deal for growth of people. And a lot of times they just don't realize there's different skills. So when I come into a company, I teach those management level people more tools to put in their tool belt, instead of, most people just have one or two tools. Like, and a lot of times it's yelling. It's do it my way. A lot of times it's just positional leadership because I'm the boss. All right. Coaching leadership is always going to be telling the whys. You do this because, and a coaching style leader, not a command and control, but a coaching style leader never gets been out of shape when somebody asks the whys. They want them to ask that.
Yeah, super interesting. Are you familiar with rocket fuel, the EOS?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, very few.
it's you're talking about positional leadership and visionary leadership here, but that book talks about um
Innovator, integrator.
yes, exactly. There's a lot of parallels there.
Yes, one hundred
And
percent.
it's you need the general thesis of that book is that the visionary is, he the generally the CEO. They've got the long term vision. They see what others can't. They're the Steve Jobs. That they're forward thinking. They see what people need before people even know they need it. And then the integrator is generally the COO. They're coming in. It's kind of the positional leadership you're talking about. They're the ones coaching the the daily tasks. They're
Yeah,
making sure that all the systems are in place to actually build towards that long-term vision that the
yeah.
visionary is
And
thinking
taking
about.
that book a step further, you're exactly right. So you got the innovator, integrator, usually CEO and COO or operations person, and then the people under them that actually make the plays are the pace setters. I like to talk about it from an NFL football team standpoint, and I'll just use the Chiefs. So Andy Reid is the coach. Patrick Mahomes is the quarterback. Okay, so as far as the hierarchy, the general managers would get the vision of the team and put it out to the team and get the draft picks and all. Andy Reid would coach the team how to play, and Patrick Mahomes does pace setting leadership. He makes the plays. Okay, if Andy Reid was at practice and instead of showing Patrick Mahomes, what he wanted him to do or what the plays are like, if he was running the plays at practice, if Andy Reid was under center and Patrick Mahomes was just watching him all week, you'd think that doesn't make sense, because you need Patrick Mahomes is the one that's going to make the plays in the game, right? And do the pace setting leadership. In a company, it's really important to be aware that the pace setting leadership of the workforce, that's usually the person that's doing customer service, that's waiting on the customer, or the person in the manufacturing facility that's on the line making the product. That's pace setting leadership, and you need people who are good at those things, doing them fast, accurate, and safe for the company to win. So realizing different styles of leadership and praising them is very important to be a good leader yourself.
Yeah, I love that. That third element, the pacer,
Pace setter.
that's something I haven't actually thought about, but that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's a great addition.
Yeah, that's in chapter. I tied all that in my book with chapter two, which is write it down. So, rule one is it all starts with you. If you can't get better, your culture's not going to get better. Then you write down what you want your culture to be, and I think that's four short steps. And then rule three, which is by far my favorite, is praise what you want repeated. And that's kind of my mantra because praise secretes dopamine, which is the happy hormone, and dopamine leads to the maximum focus chemical. So all your listeners, I tell people all the time, don't worry about me in the chemical side. Don't worry about acetylcholine, dopamine. Just know that when you praise somebody, it makes them smile, it makes them happy. And when happiness leads to maximum focus, and maximum focus is what we all want. But if you piss everybody off and you don't treat them with respect and you make them feel like they're not appreciated, then their amygdala is shut down. There's no acetylcholine. There's no maximum focus.
Yeah, it's like positive reinforcement. I've heard in research that positive reinforcement is way more effective than negative reinforcement. And I could tell that was your favorite rule since when you signed your book, you have that in there. Praise what you want repeated.
Yeah, it's my mantra, man. I actually protected that. That's my saying. Because that's how I train leaders. If you go to my website, I have a praise coin. It's how I train my managers. If you're a manager in one of my companies, the number one task and duty on your management sheet will be protect our culture. The number two will be to praise 10 times a day. And I will bring my managers in as I'm training them. And if somebody's not performing, I'll say, well, what have they done well? Have you praised that? Can you praise this up? Because that's what creates maximum focus in the brain. The next rule in my system is hold it accountable. We do have to hold accountability, but it doesn't have to be where you attack their character. You can tell somebody, hey, you don't do it this way because that's not as safe and you could get hurt. You don't do it this way because it's not as fast and we have to make production of 20 an hour and you can only do 5 an hour this way. So I want you to do it this way. Now, I didn't yell at you. Okay. So when I tell them that way, then they get it right. Then I want to praise them so that they get maximum focus. And then remember what I said about the human subconscious. It's 80 times faster. So the first few times are going to be slower, and I have to have awareness that I'm coaching them, and I get them to put that habit into their subconscious. Well, now they learn that habit, and I can move on to the next skill I want to teach them. And you can do the same in your gym. So I really do pride myself on next level simplicity, Jake. Now, if I need to take any of this simpler, is this?
Yeah,
Are you
no,
getting it?
this is great.
Awesome,
Yeah,
awesome.
I'm following. Can we fill out with the last two rules? I've got them written here, but we've gone through the first three rules.
Yeah, the last rule number 4 is hold it accountable.
Right.
So when you set this culture, when you set this environment, and we say this is the environment we want to be a part of, when somebody violates it, we have to bring them back into check. Okay,
How do
and
you go
and that,
about that?
do I?
How do you go about that without triggering that fight and flight and shutting people down?
Yeah. Okay. So there's some rules I go by. I call it the Cornelison rule of 10. I want my managers to praise 10 times for every time they have to hold accountability. Okay. Or reprimand somebody or tell them they've got to do it a different way. If you've heard me praise you all the time, your amygdala's not shut down. And now that acetylcholine's floating. So you're in maximum focus. So you'll be like, oh, yeah, this guy respects me. He cares about me. He wants me to do better so our team can win or so our team can hit production. If the only thing you ever hear from me is, Jake, man, do it this way. Jake, you're not doing a good job. Jake, man, come on. Can you not do it better or quicker than that? If you're not hearing that positive reinforcement, there's no dopamine, there's no acetylcholine. You're starting to feel disrespected. And when this goes on and on and on every day, all you're hearing is reprimand. So our amygdalas actually grow and shrink too. They become more sensitive in an environment we're not comfortable in, and they get less sensitive in an environment that we are comfortable in. One of the things I want to write about in my next book is what mental toughness really is, because I believe mental toughness has more to do with controlling your emotions than what most people think it is, which most people just think, oh, I can get my butt chewed out. Somebody can disrespect me and I can just take it. That's actually not what mental toughness is. That's just honestly, that's a side product of poor leadership from somebody that doesn't know how to lead. But I believe emotional control is the key, and emotional intelligence, the higher EQ, is the key to being mentally strong and mentally tough.
Interesting. Um, I'm gonna ask you a question, another football metaphor here. So Bill Belichick, right? He's
Hmm.
kind of that Nick Saban type. You know, he's has that reputation for being direct, you know, being blunt, and running a tight ship. I listen to a lot of sports talk, and this is when I hear people talk about his coaching style. Kind of going back to before I was really a football fan. I'm 28 now, so
Hmm.
wasn't watching for the beginning of Bill's career, but it seems to me that the sports commentators have said like he kind of went out of style. That all the coaches kind of had that rah rah, you know, put you in your place attitude, and Bill ran with that for a while, but in these newer generations, that doesn't resonate as well. So my question is, do you think that are these like universal timeless strategies to is has there always been a best way to coach, or how much of it is time dependent, trend dependent, generation dependent?
I think it's always been leadership and emotional intelligence dependent. I don't think we always knew that. If nobody's got emotional intelligence, then the team working harder, more hours has a better chance to win. But if a team's emotional intelligence, they have to have an opportunity to grow faster. With Bill Belichick, or any coach for that matter, he has a consistent system, and most of his players that play for him and love it and respect it. I heard a story about him one time I thought was interesting. It was a snowstorm and some guys were late for practice. He had a hardcore late for practice rule, and I may get the story a little off. He either, whatever their rule was, you sit out the first quarter or you don't do something, whatever it was, he held by it. Now, one player thought that that was too stringent. There's a snowstorm. The other player, and I don't even remember who the two players were. Basically, the way I understood the story was the other player is like, "Yeah, I get it." The whole team respected what he did because he just held to the thing. It wasn't anti Bill Belichick. There's rules, he follows them, black and white. See, most people in the world want that. They want black and white. We can deal with disagreeing with somebody when it's consistent. What tears your team down, what tears your work culture down, what tears your gym culture down is when one person gets away with one thing and we say it's going to be that way, and then the next person gets away with something else. If you tell the gym that they're going to get more reps, or they're going to get guaranteed. I think you ought to have mat time or something like that. Whatever the fun part of the workout, everybody's going to get to do that if you're here on time. And if you show up every day on time and you get your mat time, and I show up an hour late and I mess the whole workout up, and you throw me back in, I mess everybody up, and then I get my mat time, everybody disrespects it. So I think the key is having consistent rules and consistency and being respectful people. I don't even think Belichick, he's a little harder because he's got the military background and all that. I get that. But I don't think he's disrespectful to anybody. He treats them all the same way, and I think people want that. I'm passionate about coaches. I even got a chapter in my book about coaches. I coached a year of high school ball, just the record. So I was a coach. Like I quit practicing pharmacy and coached a year of high school ball because the school wound up needing it. And it was one of the funnest things I ever did. But I hear coaches all the time say, well, these kids are softer than they used to be. And there is some truth to that because the neocortex in kids nowadays develops a little later because they've got more technology and they don't have to make as many decisions. So there might be a little something to that. But at the end of the day, it's emotional intelligence about other people and knowing when to push and when to pull. Because those great coaches, they know when the time is to push and they know when to pull. Bill Belichick knows when to rah rah player. He does his rah rah in a different way, right? And he probably does his rah rah through other coaches. And Nick Saban does the same thing. I tell you what, you can look at a coach and tell if he's successful. Look at how many coaches Bill Belichick and Nick Saban have had under them who are coaching at other NFL and university teams. They're growing people, and so I don't. I think definitely trends and mentalities change, but I think the leadership gets back to how you treat people, how you have emotional intelligence. Early in my career, I would have been looked at as a horrible leader. Now I'm paid to come and show people how to use leadership because I got better at it. So I didn't change, and that's over 30. Well, excuse me, I did change, but my brain didn't, my chemistry didn't, my environment changed, and my perception of it changed. My EQ got better, but I believe you can lead in any generation, at any age, at any time, if you have the skill set of emotional intelligence, if you understand the prey side of the brain, and if you have a good, consistent way to treat people.
Yeah, that was kind of my my hunch when I ask that question is that these principles are timeless. Since
Yes,
since you're
yes,
bringing it all back to biological basis,
yes.
which we haven't evolved that much in the last 60 years, if
Now,
at all.
I will say this: we've all got a moral code, and we've got different belief systems, and they're all okay. They're all good in our own way, and we have to respect others. Sometimes it's hard to know what shuts somebody down. Some people can take harder coaching better than other people, but it's the perception of how they're being coached. That's an amazing thing that each of us are different, and we don't. But we all, after we get mad, we get sad, we get stressed, our brain reacts the same way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I wanted to ask a couple questions. I have them written down here. Want to make sure I get them in about writing a book. The first, it's just a quick question, but I'm curious about trademarks. I noticed you use trademarks a lot throughout your book. You mentioned you protected
Hmm.
the praise what you want repeated. I know you
Hmm.
protected superculture.
Yep.
Um, what is the process like? First of all, why did you decide that you wanted to protect those terms? What was the value you saw there, and then what's the legal process to actually get those trademarked?
Yeah, so there's trademarks. There is what I'm using now, which is called blockchain, and I'll give a plug for a company called Instant IP. Great company. You can protect stuff on the international blockchain a lot cheaper. You'll start to see my subscript will be IP now. Trademarks are a little more expensive. They're usually around $3,000. I'm not a legal expert, not giving legal advice, but you can get that stuff. And you can just protect people from using your concepts and things. And nowadays times, your intellectual property is really the value of yourself and your company and your message. Uh, I don't care if people use praise what you want repeated, but I don't want to create a phrase coin using praise what you want repeated and all that and selling it and reboxing it after I teach them. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
it gives me intellectual property and value. You can also put a trademark on something, and it's called a common law trademark. It's not very valuable, wouldn't really hold up in court. But just like say, hey, I put this idea out there. But I think the best way to do that is the book's called "You Are an IP Company." It's Kerry Overman's company, and you can protect stuff through their company on blockchain much cheaper. And you'll see that the subscript now, instead of TM, you'll see IP, and that's the one I'm leaning into. It's a little cheaper, it's a little better. And as you write a book, and they actually write books too, they'll show you how to protect different concepts and things in your book, because your intellectual property, the things you do create, that's the things that make you different. The concept of teaching things in a next level simplicity mindset. I could have sat here and just talked about norepinephrine, adrenaline, acetylcholine. I could have not given you the maximum focus side. You know, those type things kind of make me different as a speaker and a leadership teacher. And so you want to protect as much as you can. You're a young guy. You'll come up with great concepts on your podcast when you write your book and things like that. And you'll want to protect those ideas so that you can teach them and you can sell those ideas too once you protect them. To where if you don't protect it, you just put it out there, then it's just out there.
Yeah, that's why I ask. I have these ideas, and so yeah, just down the road, I
Yeah,
was just curious how to best get the value from the
yeah.
intellectual property I come up with.
You know, I don't know if it fits into your listeners, but I could get you hooked up with Kerry, and y'all could do an intellectual property one if that fits into your podcast. He's a good friend of mine. He's phenomenal.
Yeah, I would love that. Yeah, we'll chat afterwards.
Yeah, for sure,
Yeah,
for sure. I didn't mean to take us all on that tangent,
no,
but yeah,
no, it's yeah. Thank you. Another question about the book. You went through $1 Million Author? Is that
I
how you
did.
know Devin? Um,
Yeah,
what do you know Jason Gates? I did an episode with him as well. I'm not sure if you're connected to him.
I don't know Jason.
Okay,
Yeah,
we all
Million Dollar Author's awesome too, and
yeah.
Devin. That's why I wrote my book, and I just protected it on Instant IP. So yeah, Devin Sizemore is phenomenal, and Million Dollar Author's phenomenal too.
Yeah. Yeah, so Devin is with $1 Million Author. He connected me with Jason and now you, who both have books through $1 Million Author.
Mhm.
Jason, when I did an episode with him last week or the week before, he mentioned that he got an ROI on his book before it even came out, just since he was the process of writing the book. It helped him gain the clarity. Um, and then it just in his business interactions, he was talking about, hey, I'm writing this book on the things I do, and then it's, oh, what do you do, and yada yada yada, and then he signed up a few clients which covered the book. So I was curious, what was your experience with Million Dollar Author? First of all, what was the process like,
Mhm.
and then what kind of return did you get? Either actual monetary return or networking return? What have you gotten out of it?
So my book's only been out for 5 months. The process was great, and I'm a process guy. I needed that. Devin was actually I forgot the official title, what his step was, but he put my book together with me. So he was huge in that step. And they pass you on to the next people. It's about a 90-day process. It can go a little over, but somewhere in 3 to 6 months, you'll have your book completely finished. They have a little guarantee that your ROI, and there's different levels, and it gets fairly expensive. I'll let them say their price is big, it's fairly expensive, but they have a thing where they'll guarantee if you follow their marketing processes and put it out there in a way to do what you do. In my case, it was keynote speaking, leadership training. You'll get your money back in 90 days. They'll keep working with you till you do. Um, I will tell you, I've already gotten my ROI back. I got gigs based on. They have strategies to use the book as your business card and different ways to put it out there. And I did just a few of their strategies, not all, and I hadn't put them all into full play, but I have gotten my ROI back in gigs. My gigs are higher. It's easier to get them. It's You're looked at differently when you have a book versus when you don't. And I was in the keynote industry. I had gotten a couple of jobs the year before I wrote my book. And then when I went to sign the contract, they realized I didn't have a book, and they wanted to purchase 200 copies of my book at both times when we stay and sign them. And I didn't have a book, so they didn't give me the gig. And I was like, "But you've already given me the gig. You already hired me because you said I'm the guy you want." But without the book, I lost those, and so I didn't want to lose those. It gives me a calling card. Like I was able to send you a copy and give your listeners a copy. It's just get the word out. The real money's not in selling books, it's in getting your message out there. So like you would be pushing your podcast, you may have aspirations to keynote on your own writing and get messages. Me, I want to be a level 5 leader, which means I want to impact people I don't meet. I want to impact people I do meet, but I want to impact people I don't meet. And so the book gives me the opportunity to get out there fast, send people my book that I want to speak at their conference, and it gives you a higher level of legitimacy to, get the higher speaking fees and things.
Yeah, it's I only it don't, Million Dollar Author only came into my world when I did the episode with Devin, but since then it's pretty cool. They have a whole different way of. I've always kind of wanted to write a book. My mom told me at some point when I was a kid that she named me Jacob Conlon Shields, and when she wrote when she decided that name, she envisioned that on the spine of a book, for whatever reason. So it's kind of just in my mind. I was always like, yeah, someday I'll write a book, but it's cool. They have a totally different framing for being an author and what success as an author is. It's pretty brilliant from what I've seen on my end.
100%, 100%. I think they say when you think you have enough to write a book, you're ready to write the book. A lot of your listeners out there probably have had an experience in life or have overcome something and need to write the book. I thought my first book would either be on sales or leadership, but what people were clinging to in my keynotes were the work environment, and that I could show them how to have a better work environment, and that was the biggest impact. So that's the reason my first book was Super Culture.
Yeah, love it. All right, as we start to wrap up, I always like to ask about impact and the future. You just mentioned that your goal is to be a level 5 leader, where you're impacting people that you've never even met. So, what about that idea appeals to you? And then, as you go forward, what steps do you plan on taking to get there?
So I got that book concept from Good to Great years ago, the great Jim Collins book, What a Level 5 Leader Is. I thought, man, that'd be really cool. And really, I didn't want to get stuck. There's a lot of ego. There's a lot of ego in any kind of leadership, right? And you have to learn to check. You have to grow your ego enough to be confident, and you have to check it at the door so you can lead people. And that's a Ray Dalio quote. But like, for me, I just truly thrive. One of my goals is to see people get better. I want to see people do more than they think they could, and I want to be a little piece to that puzzle. The concept of doing that for people I don't even meet was something that I always wanted to do, but I didn't really know how I do it. And keynoting and teaching leadership classes to where they take my concepts and teach it in their own way and grow forever. I really like my concepts to be something that impacts you right now. If you follow the 5 steps in my book, your work environment will get better almost immediately, for sure in a 90-day period. But I want you to use it forever. I hope when people read my book, they read it again in 3 or 4 or 5 years and they're at a different mindset and they get a total new value from it because we talk about the brain and growth. Me personally, one of my goals is to learn every day, to grow every day. I'm working with a new mentor now, and he's teaching me how to collaborate with bigger businesses and help them all work together instead of compete against each other. I think that's incredibly impactful. I got another book or two idea, so I think I might slam more of that. But right now for me, it's just growing leadership trainings and conferences and putting things together in a way that people understand and use, not just say, oh, wow, that was a good keynote or I enjoyed that. I definitely want them to get some enjoyment value when I keynote, but I want to impact people, man. I want to walk out and say, and see me down the road. One of my favorite things is people will see me and they'll hold my praise coin up or something. They'll say, hey, I've been using your praise coin and it made my team better. Those are the things, man, that lights you up like nothing else can.
And then just to wrap up, right on that, when it lights you up, like what is like? Let's say there's someone who watches this podcast. You never met them. You don't even know that they've watched this podcast. You never interact with them. You never hear that how you impacted them, but you do. Um, like what why is that what lights you up? You know, like you're not getting any direct feedback from that, but you're still impacting the world. Do you believe in karma? Is there a spiritual nature to it?
Uh,
What yeah, what's the core motivation there for you?
I very much believe in the law of attraction. I believe what you focus on, you get more of. And even me, if I'm down, if I'm focusing on negative things or bad things, I'll get more of them. If I focus on making people stronger, more intelligent, more emotionally intelligent, better people, caring about people, appreciating people, my mantra is praise what you want repeated because I want people to feel more empathy from other people. I want them to notice what people are doing good around them. Uh, there's a thing when you work in your own unique ability, okay, the things that fill you up and you get through, you're not tired. Like when we get off this podcast, I've enjoyed it so much. You can feel my energy, I hope, through the mic. uh, I'm not going to be tired. I could do this all day long. I could talk about these topics all day long, and the opportunity to give your listeners just a little a nugget that might help them, it just fills me up. And I believe the universe will give me that back. I believe if we get off this podcast, somebody's going to do something for me. Somebody's going to show me a little nugget. Somebody's going to teach me something, and I'm going to learn from it. And so it is deeply spiritual for me. I believe in, the law of attraction, and what you focus on, you get more of. And, it sounds too cliche to make the world a better place, but I think that's what we all should be doing, and in our own way. And my message, my leadership, my culture, and my praise message is just how I do it. So anytime I get a chance to do it, it's energy giving, and I know from the energy I'm receiving, and if it's on point, and it just gives me chills to think one of your listeners might go out and make a change in their life after this, and that's a tribute to you, and I get to be just a small part of that equation today.
Yeah, I love that. That's I love getting down to that core level. That's
Mm-hmm.
part of what drives me in doing this podcast. So yeah, this was really awesome, Chris. As I mentioned in the beginning, www.chriscornelison.com. Use the code Quality Values, get a discount on the book
Mm-hmm.
on the website.
$5 off and free shipping.
$5 off and free shipping. I'll have links to your website, everything in the description everywhere this is posted. And yeah, Chris, has been a blast.
Cool. Thanks. Appreciate it.